My name is Robert Villarreal. Like we said, I work with a company called Pressable. We do managed WordPress hosting. We host several thousand sites, and one of the things that I'll be talking a little bit about today is a tool that we use very often called WP-CLI. This may be a little bit more of a technical talk than some of you are used to, but if you have questions, please let me know. But what I'll do is I'll do my best to try and get some value for everybody so that everybody can see exactly, if nothing else, how we use WP-CLI and why it might be important not only for yourself, but for maybe you to ask about for a developer or somebody that you're working with on a WordPress website. Having said that, a little bit of background about myself. I'm 29 right now. I'm holding on to my 20s still. I'll be 30 in a couple weeks. And I've been building websites and managing and maintaining websites since I was about 12 years old. So it's been quite a while for me. WP-CLI has been absolutely one of the most useful tools that I've ever used, and hopefully, like I said, you can learn a little bit about it so that even if you're not able to use it yourself, you can know enough about it to ask the people that you're working with or the people that you're trying to hire about the tools that they use, and maybe WP-CLI, when they mention it, you'll know a little bit about what it does. That's kind of what we're talking about. Like I said, I'll try and make this apply to as much to everybody as I can so that we can hopefully get some value for everyone. But if nothing else, then we can, we'll do our best to make sure that any questions that you have or that you'd like to have answered, we can get answered for you. So, in addition to that, if depending on how it's going or how we feel, I guess we can judge like how long we'll go and how technical and how in depth we want to go. But if nothing else, then we'll have a nice little chit chat about some really cool and useful tools. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So just to expand a little bit on what WP-CLI actually is it's a command line interface for WordPress. And what that means is that as people who manage sites on a daily basis and people who also maybe write code or work on servers, one of the biggest challenges that we find is that it can be very difficult to move between tool sets easily. And what that means is that when you're writing code, sometimes you're writing code in a terminal. When you're working on a server, you're absolutely working in the terminal. And if you're developing a lot of sites or managing a lot of sites, either as an agency or a developer, then it can become a little bit cumbersome to kind of try and keep up with a lot of what comes with the day-to-day maintenance of a WordPress website. Running updates, installing new plugins, adding and removing users, all sorts of things like that. Also, from the perspective of a developer, WP-CLI is a really useful tool because it allows you to automate some things that otherwise would take you a long time to kind of do by hand using WordPress's built-in graphical user interface. So basically, WordPress, WP-CLI is that command line set of tools that we use so that instead of having to go in and log into a website and manage a website through its interface all the time, we can leverage the power of the command line, and we can also stay inside the command line for as long as possible and be as productive as possible without ever having to leave that environment. Does anybody have any questions right off the bat? All right. So some of this may look a little funky if you've never seen the command line, but really the way that you can think of it is that I'm issuing a command to WordPress using this tool set. And so whenever you see me type WP, I am addressing this tool set called WP-CLI, and then whatever comes after that is how I'm interacting with it. So for instance, you'll see me do here in just a few minutes issue a command called WP Plugin Install. And what that'll do is that will allow me to install the plugin directly from the command line, a plugin of my choice. And so we'll go through a few of that. Ultimately what we're going to do is we are going to, from scratch, install, configure, and mess with a WordPress website in all sorts of different ways. without ever having to leave the command line. In this case, we'll leave it to see what's happening on the browser end. But beside that, generally everything that we do will not be through the WordPress interface. It will be done through the command line. And then we'll talk a little bit about the implications of that and how I use it currently in my life, and how developers might use it if they chose to do so. So I guess I'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to sit down over here and then we'll focus on the screen for now. So I guess obviously the first thing to mention here is WP-CLI is available from WP-CLI.org. If you've never worked with command line tools before, there's maybe a little bit of a learning curve. But if you have, then it's a very quick and simple install. I'm not going to go through that right now, just because it's a little bit it's a little bit too in depth, I guess, for here. But it is rather simple to install itself and get going. So. So like we discussed, everything that I'm going to do here is going to be done on the command line and from start to finish. The URL that I'm going to be working with is this WP-CLI talk.dev URL. This URL actually will load on my server, and right now, obviously, because I don't have anything in my site install directory, there's nothing here on that page, and so that's kind of the reason why we need to get something there and get something installed. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, like we talked about, I'm going to go ahead and issue a command to WP-CLI, and the first command that I'm going to do is called WP core download. WP core download, what it is it's a very simple command to just download the latest version of WordPress, as it exists in the WordPress repository. So with the simple command, what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and download and lay out the files for WordPress 4.3.1, which is the current version of WordPress. You'll see that what it does is it gives it. If you've looked at this set of files before, these are the default WordPress core files. If you ever had to install WordPress on your own before, you'll know that WP-config is always missing. It's something that you have to create. So if I go back over here and load my site, what we'll see is that we have the screen that we normally go through to actually set up and configure a WordPress website. And again, if you've ever done this before, you know that the first thing that has to be done is you actually need to create a WP config file. But rather than do it the traditional way, which is open up a text editor and copy a sample file and to create your own WP config, what we're going to do is we're going to create it from the command line. And the way that we do that is by issuing the command WP core config. Now, WP core config in itself will not work, and the reason why is because it's expecting a number of parameters. It wants to know your database's name, your database's user, where your database is located at, and a whole bunch of other things. One kind of important note here is that you can find documentation on any command that you would want to issue WP-CLI by using the WP help command. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll do WP help core config, and what it's going to do, actually this will not work currently because I have not actually put WordPress down yet, but what I can do is I can do WP core config and then use a flag called prompt, and what that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and prompt me for all of the information that I would normally enter into the text editor that I use. So for right now, everything that all of my usernames and passwords are all going to be WP-CLI talk. My database is on my computer. And then I'm going to pause here for a second because this is a little bit of an important note. The database prefix part of this is pretty important because if you know or have heard of or have talked or learned anything about WordPress, one of the more important ways that people who work with WordPress suggest to to harden a WordPress install, meaning make it a little bit more secure, is they recommend using a table prefix that is not WP underscore, which is the default. So in this case, we'll go ahead and use WP-CLI underscore as our table prefix, just to make it something a little bit different. And also just to show you that putting everything in here is actually has some sort of effect on what comes out the other end. We don't really need a character set. We're not going to worry about these options for right now, but you'll see that you can set a locale. So if you're building a site in Italian, or if you're building a site in Portuguese or Spanish, you can modify your locale to use the correct language code, ENEN or ESSP, or any of the other language codes that you could possibly want to use. This extra PHP flag is if you would like to pass some code to it in addition to what WordPress handles normally on an install. We don't really need that at the moment, so we're going to go ahead and skip that. The salts we're not going to skip, but the salts are used kind of in creating anything secure inside WordPress. We don't want to skip the salts, but a reason why you would want to skip the salts is if you were going to pass your own using extra PHP. We're not going to do that right now, so we'll go ahead and just skip that for now. And skip check, what that does is by default, WP-CLI checks to make sure that the database information that I just entered actually works. And if I skip the check, what it's going to do is it's going to not verify that any of this information works. In this case, I want the check. I know that my database is set up and it's ready to go. I know that I've already used this username and password, so it's ready to go. I'm not worried about failing the check. You could use it also to make sure that you actually didn't fat finger anything and enter something incorrectly. But one of the reasons why you might want to skip the check is if you haven't already set up your database and your users and everything like that, and you don't want WP-CLI to freak out on you. So we're not going to skip the check. We're just going to go ahead and hit enter so it doesn't skip it. Alright, so what it did is it actually generated our WP config file now. And if we go back over here and just refresh the page, it'll tell me now that the WP config file already exists. So we know that this is working. We know that WP config was generated, and we'll go ahead and visit the site again just to see, just to show that. This is also the next step in when you're doing this install by hand. It wants you to set up a default username, give your site a title, insert an email, and generate it, or set a default password for everything. But again, because we're not really interested right now in doing this by hand, we're interested in doing it from the command line, we're going to do it through the command line. So what we'll use is a command that's a WP core install. Now WP core install also will take the prompt flag, and it's going to allow us to actually insert these values one by one through the command line. You'll notice that in the WP core config one above, it's showing in square brackets what my options were for flags. So if I didn't want it to prompt me, if I want to just enter it all at one time, I could use db name equals, and db user equals, and db pass equals. But instead I chose it to prompt just so that we kind of go through them and talk about them one by one. WP core install is the same way. We're going to go ahead and have it prompt for us so that we can talk about these options. So the first thing that's going to ask me for is the URL. The URL in this case, as we discussed, was going to be wp-cli talk.dev. Go into that. The title, we're just going to call it. Fat fingered that, sorry. wp-cli talk.dev. We'll call it wp-cli. Gosh, sorry. wp-cli talk.dev. WP-CLI talk. We're going to go ahead and set up a default admin username. Again, kind of just as a little bit of a side note, one of the ways to harden your WordPress install, make it a little bit more secure, is to use an administrator username that isn't admin or administrator. One of the most common ways that people attempt to brute force a site and attack a site is through brute force. By checking common usernames and passwords, and if you're using admin or administrator as your default username, then I would advise changing that just to kind of make your site a little bit more secure. So for right now, we're just going to name this WP-CLI talk, because that's what we're naming everything else. And my password is going to be WP-CLI talk, because I don't want to forget it. The admin email is the email address that you want to associate with this default or with this first administrative user. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and use Robert@me.com. Don't sign me up for unsavory things, please. So now WordPress is installed successfully. It's taken us through the things that we would have normally done here. We would have normally entered the site title or the username, the password, the email, and then clicked install WordPress, and it would have done all of that for us. But again, because we want to do this through the command line, that's how we did it. So I'm going to go ahead and visit the site one more time. And now we have a basic WordPress install. This is what WordPress looks like when you first bring it up and there's nothing in it. This is just a default WordPress install. There's no plugins installed except for the default plugins. It has the basic WordPress theme. It has just everything very generic at the moment. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and log into the back end of the site just so that we know and can verify that what we set up earlier actually works. And it does. We can log in using our username and our password. If we go and check the installed plugins, we see that we have just our basic default WordPress plugins. Go to our users tab, we have just me, and everything looks just like a normal WordPress install. So we're in good shape at the moment. I haven't messed anything up, forgotten anything. So now what we're going to do is let's take a look at, let's start kind of building this site out a little bit and messing with it a little bit and seeing what we can kind of get going.
Quick question.
What's up?
The search engine, when that last option?
Yes. So there is no option, as far as I know, to set the privacy setting to off, but let me see, let's look in the, this is a good moment to kind of look at the help documentation. So if we do WP help core install, what it's going to do is it's going to give us documentation about the core install subcommands of WP-CLI. And so in this case, we'll see that it doesn't give me that option. We can modify that, and I'll see if I can. I've never actually thought about disabling that by default. But, I'll see. We'll see if we can figure that out here. It's a good question. Now, what he's talking about is that in the a little while earlier, when you're looking at the graphical user interface for installing WordPress, there's a checkbox there for having WordPress use private, keep the site private or open it up to search engines by, during the install phase. That option is not available in the core install with the core install command, but we'll see if we can modify that here in just a second using WP-CLI also. So let's talk a little bit real quick about this WP help command. WP help is actually the documentation built into the command, into this interface. And so you'll see that if you just use WP help, it'll give you an overview of all of the commands that are available to you. And you'll see that there is a whole bunch of them, more than we could talk about, in the time that we have. So we'll go over the more basic ones and the ones that I feel most people can use more frequently. But you can see that there's a lot of flexibility here, and you can do anything that you would want to do. One thing that I do want to note is these global parameters. The global parameters are here actually because with any WP-CLI command, you can pass one of these global parameters, and it will actually work for any WP-CLI command. What that means is that if any command that I'm running, I wanted to skip WordPress loading any of the plugins that it needs to load during a normal WordPress page load, then I can use the skip plugins flag. If I wanted WordPress to skip themes as a part of its normal WordPress load, I could use the skip themes flag. That's really important, especially as a developer, because if you have a bug in your code, something that's causing your WordPress install to not to get through its entire loading phase, then WP-CLI also can suffer from that. And so if you use the skip themes and skip plugins flags, it allows WordPress to actually give you the data that you want without falling victim to the bug in your code wherever it's at. Incidentally, that also makes for kind of a really nice troubleshooting tool, because if you use the skip themes flag and all of a sudden your WP-CLI commands are working, that means that there's an issue in one of your themes. If you use skip plugins and your WP-CLI commands begin working as a result of that, then that means that you have an issue in one of your plugins. And so that can be very helpful. As always, like we saw earlier, you can use -- prompt for any value for any command that you want to use. So if you want to go take it one at a time for any of the commands that you issue, then you can do that. And then there's also some really nice tools for debugging and suppressing any information just in case you don't really care about it. So that's WP help. So one of the first things that we want to do is let's go ahead and maybe add a user and change the password that we just used here a second ago. With WP-CLI, the way to work with users on your site, currently existing or ones that you need to add or remove, is through the WP user command. Now, one of the nice things about WP-CLI is that if you've got an incomplete command, it will give you the options right in the command line for what you may want to do with it. So we can see that for WP user, if we just type WP user, it's not a valid command on its own, so it gives us all of the options that we might want to use. In this case, we can see that there's WP user add capabilities, add roles, we can create a new user, we can delete a new user, we can generate a random number of users. So if you wanted to inflate the number of users that you have on your site for some reason, you could do that. You can even import user lists if you're trying to migrate a site from one to the other. That's very helpful. And then you can also, from the command line, use WP user update to update passwords, update emails, update names, update all sorts of stuff. And then one of the most important ones, and one that I use rather frequently, is WP user list, which will actually give me, list all the users that are on the site for me. So that's what I'll do first. So I'll go ahead and do WP user list, which has a very obvious outcome. All it's going to do is it's going to list in a very nice and readable way all of the currently existing users on the site. So we'll see that user ID number 1 is just the default user that I created earlier, and there's no other users because I never actually added anybody. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a user. We'll use WP user create, and it's going to yell at me because I'm not passing it any information, but that's kind of important right now because I want to show you some of the options that WP user create has available to it. WP user create, you can pass it all of this information or none of this information if you'd like, but at the very least you need to give it the login and the email. WordPress by default now will generate a password for you if that's what you would like it to do. And then, so if you have a user that you just want to create, you don't need to necessarily send the password out immediately, then you can just create the user. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and give it a password just so that we can show that we can still log in and everything. And then you're also allowed to assign it a role. If you want to create a new user that's just a subscriber, or just an editor, or just or as an administrator, then we can use the role command to do that. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to do WP user create, and I want Jeff here in the lovely salmon colored shirt to be a user on my site. So I'm going to go ahead and add Jeff, and he is Jeff at
JustSalmonShirts.com.
JustJeffThings.com. So that's his. That's what we're going to use as his email, or actually, it's just put Jeff as the username, and then he will be Jeff at JustJeffThings.com. I want him to be an administrator on my site, so I'm going to set the administrator role, and then his password, I want to be Jeff, because I hate secure passwords. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to go ahead and pass a first name and a last name. And I hope I spelled his last name right, which I believe I did. And then what you can do is you can use the -- send email flag to send Jeff an email that notifies him of that he's just been created as a user on my site, and that he, this is where he can go to reset his password and stuff like that. I'm not going to use that for now, just because Just Jeff Things isn't a site that Jeff actually lives at. So, but maybe he wants to buy the domain because it's kind of a cool domain.
I didn't think about it.
I'm going to go ahead and run this command, and it created it for me. Success created user. So I'm going to go and do another WP user list real quick and just see what I've got. So we see that now I have WP-CLI talk as a user, as my original user. I now also have Jeff, who is my secondary user. He's also an administrator. And then if we just kind of want to go back to the interface real quick and verify that, we'll go to the Users tab and we'll see that Jeff is in the user interface. And again, we still haven't done anything in the user interface besides click around. We haven't added any users. We've done all of this in WP-CLI still. We talked about having a little bit of an insecure password just a second ago. And also I've decided that I really don't like Jeff a whole lot. I don't really want him administering my site. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a WP user update. And what WP user update is, and I'm going to hit enter here just so that we can see what things it will expect from us at the very least. What it's going to want is it's going to want a user and what information I want to update. When I use user, what it's expecting is it's actually expecting the user ID. So Jeff's user ID is number 2. I think the most recent version of WP-CLI will actually take the user login. This version actually just came out a couple of days ago, so let's go ahead and live life on the edge and we'll check to see if that works. But I want to update his role to be an editor instead, and I want to update his user password to be something random so he can't log in anymore. And we'll go ahead and update there. So I went ahead and updated that, and now if I do another user list, we'll see that Jeff is now an editor. And even though it doesn't show his password, obviously, the password does get changed. We could do the same thing if we want to do WP user update. Oh, we also see that Jeff did actually get taken. So now in the most recent version of CLI, you can use just the login name, not just the user ID.
Can you undo?
Yeah, I can undo it. Well, I could undo it by just updating it again.
Put it again.
Yeah.
As administrator.
Right. Yeah. So we'll do that. Let's say WP user update Jeff. I decide that I like him again. We'll make him an administrator one more time. But this time, I want his actual user email to be jeff@jeff.com, because his other one was way too long. So we'll go ahead and do that. And now if I do a WP user list, Jeff's back to being an administrator. His user email is jeff@jeff.com, and everything got updated. So we'll go ahead and just one more time, we'll go ahead and check in the interface. His email has checked to jeff@jeff.com. He's now an administrator again, and he's ready to go. He's back. He's got access to my site again. So WP user has a lot of flexibility. What we'll do here is we'll go ahead and I guess let's go ahead and add Josh. What's up?
Just user import CSV.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that's another great one. Import. What he's talking about is user import CSV. That's actually really cool because you can import through the command line a whole bunch of users that you already have in comma-separated values form. So what that means is that before you're building out a site, if you wanted to create a CSV file with all the users and emails and roles and even passwords, you could use WP-CLI to just do a very simple WP user import CSV and pass it the file that you would like to import with all of the usernames, all the passwords, or everything that you would need, and it would very easily import as many users as you would like it, to. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm changing developers. I hate Jeff, and I want to add Josh. So I'm going to go ahead and WP user create Josh. He is Josh at justjoshthings.com. And I want him to be an administrator. And I want his user pass. Actually, we'll leave the user pass off here, but I do want his first name in there. And I do want his last name in there. There we go. So you'll see that when I didn't pass it a password, WP-CLI will give me the password that it generated for him. That's really important because if you don't want to create insecure passwords, like even for a second, then you can have something that you can see is a lot more secure. It's generated by WordPress, and you can supply it to somebody as you would like. One of the actual nice things about it is that using that -- send email flag, as of WordPress 3.4.0, WordPress will actually send a secure email now instead of sending a password in plain text. And so if you use the -- send email flag, what it's going to do is it's going to have an email sent to the user themselves with a link to reset their password and do everything that you would like. So I'll leave it off for now, and we'll just create Josh. Oh, whoops! I already created Josh. I forgot about that. So if we do a username, if we do a list again, we can see that Josh is in there now. He's an administrator, and now I can go ahead and get rid of Jeff. So I can do WP user delete Jeff. One thing that I forgot is that the reassign. I'm going to use -- prompt here. The reassign parameter, what that is that if you've ever tried to delete a user in WordPress, you'll know that if that user has posts, that WordPress wants you to reassign those posts to somebody. It wants you to attribute those posts to a user that is still going to exist on the site once you delete somebody. In this case, Jeff doesn't have any posts on my site, so it doesn't really matter. So I'll just go ahead and put reassign Josh for now. So you'll see that it went ahead and successfully removed the user. And now if I do my user list one more time, Josh is in and Jeff is out, which is the way that I like it. Because Jeff is not who he used to be 10 minutes ago.
Turn on your friends pretty quick, bro.
Yeah. So now Josh is in there, and everything is ready to go. So, and then obviously Josh can be updated and managed from the command line as well, if that's what we would like. And so the WP user command can do essentially and in reality everything that you could possibly need to do and could do through the user interface, but we do it through the command line. Again, the thought process here is that if I'm already sitting in my site, editing code and just doing like modifying code, working on my site in the command line, developing something, editing files, that I don't ever have to leave the interface to do anything. I can do it all from the command line very, very quickly through here. And we'll see the power of that right now, because what we're going to move on to is we're going to move on to the WP Plugin command. Now, one of the first things that most people do whenever they're building a WordPress site from the ground up, first thing that you do is you go and you install your theme and you install all of the plugins that you need to install. That part of this is what makes WP-CLI very, very powerful, because what you would normally do is you would normally go into the plugin interface, you go to add new, you would one by one search for all of the plugins that you want to install on your site, and then one by one you'd go through and install them individually. That's not what I'm interested in here. What I'm interested in is I want to do as much as I can very quickly. And so what we can do is, let's say that I wanted to just install 4 plugins right off the top of my head in one quick swoop, right? We can do that with WP-CLI using the WP Plugin Install command. Now, WP Plugin Install is connected to the WordPress repository. So any plugin that's available on WordPress.org and is up in the plugin repository can be downloaded and installed immediately from the command line. Not only that, but there are flags that we can pass it that will even activate a plugin immediately. So for right now, what we're gonna do real quick is we're just gonna do a WP plugin list, and we can see that we have 2 plugins currently. One is the default Hello Dolly, one's a Kismet. Both of them are inactive. Neither of them has an update for them, and then it gives us their actual version number. There is an alternative to WP plugin list called WP plugin status. And WP plugin status is just a little bit of a different way that it presents the data to you. We'll see on the left-hand side there's an I for inactive plugins. It still gives you the plugin name and then the plugin version. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and WP plugin activate a Kismet for right now. It's activated, and now if I do a WP plugin status again, we'll see that a Kismet is now active, Hello Dolly is now inactive. Most people don't even like Hello Dolly.
No, I delete it.
Yeah, you delete it right away, right? Get rid of it. Most people have no use for it. It's kind of cool. It's a nice little novelty. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and do a WP plugin delete hello. And what that does is that one more time will show us that it's gone. So I changed my mind. I want Hello Dolly. I missed it a little bit. You know, I want those quotes every time I refresh the page. I want to get it back. Not only that though, but I want to install all of the plugins that I'm used to, right? All of the plugins that I know I'm going to need right off the bat.
If you delete from this area instead of on the graphic, is it the same type of delete?
It's the same type of delete.
It doesn't go deeper, or, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Sure, yeah. It's the same type of delete, and the only parameter that plugin delete will take actually is just the delete. Now, there is a difference between WP plugin deactivate and delete. The part that he's discussing is that oftentimes when you deactivate a plugin can have a script and a process that it runs on deactivation that is actually can be very important for some plugins. And so through the WordPress interface, instead of just outright deleting a plugin, if I want it to actually run its deactivation scripts before I delete it, then I would do WP plugin deactivate. And so what I would do at that point is if I do a WP plugin status again here, let's say I would do a WP plugin deactivate a Kismet. It would deactivate the plugin, and then from here I can WP plugin delete a Kismet.
You clean all the files.
Right, clean everything. We'll get everything. The plugin will run its deactivation scripts. It'll remove any database tables that it wants to remove. If that's part of what the plugin does, it'll do everything that it wants. So now I've deleted actually both of my plugins. I have none installed. I've got nothing. But I kind of need a Kismet. Kismet's great. We want a Kismet. Yeah, if you're not using a Kismet, you should be, or at least some serviceable alternative. But we want a Kismet, and it should be active at all times. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just do a WP plugin install. And I'm going to pass it as many plugins as I want. So I'm going to pass it a Kismet. I want to pass it Hello Dolly. I want to pass it Jetpack. I want to pass it, what's somebody's favorite SEO plugin?
Yoast.
Yoast. It's, what is it, WordPress SEO, I think is the Yoast one.
Yes.
And then I guess we'll do,
Backup.
which one?
Backup. Updraft.
You're talking about
Updraft. Backup.
Updraft Backup?
Updraft plus one word.
Draft. Is that the slug for it?
No, updraft plus the word plus, yeah. Plus the word plus. There's no space. One word.
So I'm not sure.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll do updraft. Let's see if it does updraft. And actually, if nothing else, then we'll see what happens when it finds when you're entering a plugin that it doesn't recognize, right? And it'll actually give us an opportunity to use the WP plugin search function here in just a second. So I wanted to install all these plugins. I wanted to download and install them, but not only that, but I'm going to pass it an activate flag. And what the activate flag is going to tell it is not only just download them all, go ahead and activate them right away. And so what I'm going to see is that in my plugins menu, I have none right now. And then when I run this here, it's going to go ahead and go through, download Akismet, install it. We've got some errors here, so that's important. I think hello is a hello Dolly instead of just hello. So we'll check into that. We see that installed Yoast SEO right now. We installed Yoast SEO. Updraft, it installed Updraft.
Good.
And it active. And then at the very end, or you'll see that after each of them, it says activating, activating, activating Jetpack. And so now if we do our WP plugin status, we'll see that very, very quickly we installed 4 plugins and activated them all in one little command. It was very quick. We didn't have to go through and click add new a million times and do them one by one. We didn't have to go through SFTP and activate each of them one by one. All we had to do was with one quick command, issue a very quick command with all the plugins that we wanted it to have, and then install it. And so then you'll see that in our interface now we have all of the plugins that we really want, and they're right there. And so now, let's see if we can go back and we're going to use WP plugin search. Now WP search, WP plugin search can actually be modified in a whole bunch of different ways. One of the ways that I want to use it right now is I just want to figure out what the actual slug name for Hello Dolly is, which I believe is Hello-Dolly, but we'll find out. So what we'll do is we'll do WP plugin search and we'll just pass it a term. So let's pass it Hello Dolly. So when we do this search, what it's going to do is it's going to give us some of the more common search results. It's the same as if we would have gone into add new and searched for Hello Dolly here. We'll say it gave us Hello Dolly for your song, Hello Simpsons chalkboard gag, my Hello Dolly. Same thing. We get the same search results, but we get them presented to us in the command line interface. Again, the goal here is that I never have to leave the command line to do anything. All of what I've done so far I can do from the command line, and if you think about it, it's taken me seconds to type all of these commands. I could have configured and installed all of the, downloaded, configured WordPress, and installed all of these plugins in less than a minute, and even added a user in less than a minute, all from the command line. The most important thing is that what WP plugin takes is it takes this slug. This slug is the most important thing because we know these plugins by a certain name, but whatever they're called is not always what their slug is. Slider Revolution is a good example of that. Slider Revolution is called Slider Revolution, but its slug is Rev Slider. And that's an important thing to know because when we're working with WP-CLI, we want to pass it a slug every time. This slug is actually also really important because if you actually go to the WordPress plugin page, you'll see that the plugins are organized by their slug. At WordPress.org, it's WordPress.org/plugin/Hello Dolly. If we want to look for the Yoast SEO plugin, it's WordPress SEO. So wherever, if you know the URL for here, let's do Updraft. If you know the URL here, then you know what the slug is to actually install it using the command line, right? And so everything is the same when you're looking at it on the website as you are somewhere else. This is actually really cool also because if you're browsing a website and the website is the top 5 plugins that you need for this holiday season, if you just know the slug, if you click all 5 and you load them in your browser, say, okay, I see that one is called Snowflakes. I see this one is called Christmas Wish List. I see this one is called whatever. Then you can actually go drop into the command line and issue a WP plugin install for all of those slugs that you really want to do. So in this case, we'll look for WP plugin install Hello-Dolly. Now I didn't activate it this time. So when we do a WP plugin status, it'll be the only inactive plugin that I have. So there we go. Okay, so now here's the other thing, is that this is actually really cool because through the command line, you can very easily install older versions of plugins, which I wouldn't typically recommend, but for the sake of example, you can install previous versions of a specific plugin through the command line interface. So let's say, for instance, that WordPress SEO 2.3.5, I just want whatever the previous version is, right? And so, for example, like if we, let's see, plugin search, press SEO. I don't think that it gives us a way to see the version history, but I could be wrong.
Can you just specify a version history like 2.3?
We can specify, but you would have to know the version. So let's just take a guess, right? I mean, I don't know.
First version.
We'll try for the previous, or we'll see if maybe we just do 2.3. So I'm going to go ahead and do WP Plugin Deactivate WordPress SEO, and I'm going to go ahead and do WP Plugin Delete WordPress SEO. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do WP Plugin Install WordPress-SEO -- version equal 2.3. Great, we hit it. There is a 2.3. So now what we're going to do is when we do a WP plugin status, and this is important, because it's going to show that there's an update for WordPress SEO. And you can see it by the little U that's next to it. And that actually is very helpful because of the WP plugin update command. Now you can issue it in a number of different ways. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do WP plugin install Kismet -- version equal 3.1. And I'm going to pass it a force. What force does is it actually forces WordPress to say, hey, I know you already have a newer version installed, but I'm going to force you to install the one that I'm telling you to install. That's what force does. And so now if we do a WP plugin status, we'll see that both Akismet and WordPress SEO are out of date. Now WP plugin update works in a couple different ways. You can do WP plugin update, WordPress SEO, and Akismet. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it a flag called dry run. And what dry run does is it's going to tell you what the current version of the plugin is and what it's going to be updated to, and it's also going to show you what would get updated. So in this case, it shows us that Yoast SEO is on 2.3 and the updated version is 2.3.5. Akismet is on 3.1, the latest is 3.1.5. But it didn't actually do anything because I passed it dry run. All I wanted to do was tell me what's gonna happen. And so if I just do a plugin status again real quick, whoops. If I just do a plugin status again real quick, I'll see that my plugins are still out of date. Now this actually works because I'm gonna do it one more time for Jetpack here.
It's up to you. You want to update them.
Yeah, and not only that, but not only is it up to me if I want to update it, I can update them all together or individually or just a couple and not others. I can give it whatever combination I would really like to give it at my leisure. So I'm going to do it one more time just so I can, just so that I can illustrate this this example here. Whoops. Keep typing plugins. So I have three plugins out of date. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to update Akismet for now. And I'm going to do a dry run just for, actually I'm just going to, we'll do this. WP plugin, update Akismet. And what's going to happen is it updates just Akismet and it spits out everything that happened. It updated one plugin, there's the old version and the new version, and that's the name of the plugin. So now if I do a plugin status, I'll see that everything is still, or Jetpack and WordPress SEO have an update for them. Akismet does not. Now for these other two, it would stink if what I had to do was WP plugin update, Jetpack, and WordPress SEO. I don't have to. What I can do is I can actually pass it a -- all flag, and what that'll do is that'll update everything that needs to be updated. And we'll see that that happened right here. So when I run WP plugin status again, everything's totally up to date. This functionality is actually very similar, and because we're here already, WP theme works the same way. WP theme status tells me what my current themes are, which one is active, you see the one with the A, whether or not it's got an update for it, which ones are inactive, and it also works in the other very same way. WP plugin, WP theme activate 2014. Now, before I do that, let's go back to my site, just in case you forgot. Just in case you forgot what 2015 looks like. This is it, right? So we're going to go ahead and activate 2014. Now when we do a WP theme status, you'll see that 2014 is now active, and then when we actually go back to our site, we're on 2014. And if we just go back and instead we'll do 2013, when we go back to our site, 2013 is active. I want to be on 2015, kind of cool. And in fact, another one of those things that you can do if you want to just make your site a little bit more secure is delete inactive themes, because they're not doing you any good, you don't need them. And in this case, these are in the WordPress repository, they're free, you can download them anytime you want. And so I'm going to go ahead and just delete them. Delete 2015, 2014 and 2013. And we'll do a WP theme status.
Is there a flag or something you can pass it just to tell it to delete inactive themes? Like all the inactive themes?
Let's see. It doesn't look like it. Let me see. WP help theme delete. There is no flag, but what you could do is with a little bit of command line, with a little bit of I'm not entirely sure that I could actually make this happen, but at the moment. But if you had theme install 2013, what you could do is you could do something like this. Theme install 2012. All right, so hear me out here. This is a fly this is by the seat of my pants kind of thing. So let's see if we can make it happen. So what we'll do is we'll do a WP plugin list. I'm sorry, WP theme list. Now WP theme list, what you can do is you can actually pass it. You can actually pass it a thing where it says fields. Fields equal name. And what that'll do is it's going to give you just the name, right? And so from here, what I can do is let's see if I can do WP theme list. Oh, whoops. WP help theme list, because I can pass it. Yeah, so what I can do is I can do WP theme list -- status equal inactive -- fields equal name, and then just for the sake of laziness, we'll do RM. I think that should work, maybe, Josh?
What's said?
What that will do is it's going to take whatever comes from the result, and then it will issue a command to it.
Okay.
So in this case, it would be remove. And I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll see. Actually, it would be. Let's see if this works. Oh. What you could do is pass it that value, and then and then it would actually go through and delete it. I don't have the command line trickery right off my pants to make it happen, but it is absolutely possible. Yeah.
I got a question for you real quick. How safe it is to make all these updates, like when it comes to, excuse me, parent theme, child theme, custom theme?
Actually pretty safe. So the latest version of WP-CLI actually will denote which is a parent theme and which is a child theme. So long as you are comfortable, if you would be comfortable enough updating it from the interface, then you can update it from the command line also with the exact same result. The difference there would be, or the only thing that I would note there is that anything that's a premium theme, if it doesn't have a built-in updater for it, you're not gonna see what updates need to be there. But beside that, like you could do anything that you wanted in the same, as long as you were comfortable updating it through the interface. You would. There's no reason to be less comfortable doing it through the command line at all.
Okay,
it would be all the same.
that's awesome, because I've seen some clients where they have so-called inexperienced developers. When they build the site, they tend to forget to build on the child theme, because if you have it on the child theme, it's much easier to update
For sure.
without breaking the main site. But when they build on the parent theme and they run the update through the dashboard, and that basically ruins everything if they don't do a backup and anything.
Yeah, for sure. If you don't have a backup, then absolutely. I mean, if you don't have a backup and you've been working on your parent theme and you update it, then you're going to have the same results if you do it that way as if you were to update it through the interface. There's going to be no difference there. The difference, though, is I guess that if you were in the command line, you could go to your themes folder and do like a copy.
Right.
Like you could back it up yourself, if that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, it is much faster too. That's
from
for
here.
sure.
Yeah. The other thing, and I guess this is another thing that you could do is like if you did like an ls-1 for 20t.
Oh, okay.
Whoops.
PHP files. And this only done from can we do this over the tablet or mobile device, all this command line, or just on the laptop?
So you can do it on anything that has a command line.
Okay.
And WP-CLI is able to be installed on. So that could, if your mobile device allows you to get WP-CLI installed, then you could totally do it from a mobile device. But it would be purely based on whether you had that ability.
Yeah, because one of my developers, she codes from a mobile device.
I see.
So every time I send an update, I'm like, "What are you doing?" I'm just fixing it. I'm like, "How you
Yeah,
doing
I mean, you totally could. You totally could if that's what you wanted to do.
Okay.
But it would kind of be up to you to make it happen.
that?" Awesome.
So one thing that I will note though is that for the sake of Denali's question here is actually really important, because when you do a WP theme list, you can actually pass it a format. So like in this case, if I wanted to pass it the JSON format, what it'll do is it'll give me JSON output for the theme list and the plugin list. Now think about this for a second. What this means is that if you have an app interface built like in Ruby or even in PHP that you wanna pass it some sort of JSON data to see at any given time whether there's updates for a plugin, like JSON is one of the most widely used formats output formats for anything right now. And so being able to run a command and have JSON output for you, built already for you, that you can then pass to any other program is actually really, really cool. And it allows you to do some really cool things, not only with your website, but with anything that you wanted to build. Being able to output in JSON is great. This actually also works for like user list. If you do WP user list -- format, you can do it in JSON, or you can do it in CSV. And CSV is really nice because if you're trying to keep a table or just have some sort of data that you can use later on, like outputting it in CSV is actually can be very, very useful. It's something that you can save to import all your users later on.
Yeah.
This format flag can be passed with anything that uses list. So if you want to do format equal JSON for all of your plugins, you can do that. If you wanted to just do plugins where the status was equal to inactive, then you could do that. If you wanted to do WP plugin list where status was inactive and the fields that you wanted are the name and the slug, and you want it to output it in JSON, and whoops, let's just put status. Just use version. then you can do that. WP-CLI allows some really great flexibility for how you want your data presented to you. And if you think about the possibilities here, like what you can do on the back end for stuff like this, you could build a plugin, or you could build an app on your server, write a piece of code for your web app, even if it's not written in WordPress, but it was in Ruby, where it let you know instantly. You could set a cron job that would do a WP plugin list, where update, I guess, let's see here, let's see what that would be. WP plugin install, Kismet, WordPress SEO, -- version, 2.5, let's force it. And we'll do WP plugin list -- name. Okay, so it's update available. So if you wanted to write an app that would instantly notify you whenever you've got a plugin that has an update, then you could set a cron job to grab the output from this and then send an email if anything shows up with an update available. That's really powerful, because this extends beyond WordPress, and it turns the person, the developer, or the people using this from being just being able to just use WordPress to do things, to actually being able to make your server more intelligent and know more about your site, your web app more intelligent, know more about your site. And so this can actually be really useful. And like I said, this actually works for everything. It works for themes, it works for users, it even works for posts. I know we haven't talked about posts.
That's nice.
I know we haven't talked about posts yet, but man, imagine the power when you can get all of your post data in JSON format.
Mm-hmm.
The upcoming version of WordPress is going to have a RESTful API in it, which is going to actually make things like this a little bit more of it's going to make it a secondary option. But in the current version of WordPress, to be able to have all your posts output in JSON and be able to work with that would be really, really cool. So, and actually, speaking of posts, let's go ahead and do some of that. WP Post. WP Post is really cool because it means that you can do anything from the command line in creating a post that you could do from the web interface. When we just did a WP post list right now, we saw that we only have one post. I could remove that. I could change the post status to private or in draft mode, whatever I want to do. I could even go through and use WP post generate to generate just some sample posts. Count equal 5. So now when I do a WP post list, I've got 5 sample posts. When I go to my site, they're there. They don't have anything in them, but they're there. And so if I do a WP post, so if I do, let's see, WP post update, whoops, WP post update. Let's update post number, the one with post number, with the title post number 6, which is the ID. You'll see that it's expecting an ID here, so I'll pass it 8. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask it to prompt me. So the ID will stay the same. 8, I guess. I don't need to pass it. What file is if you want to update the post from a file, you can do that. So if you wanted to type your post, like if you wanted to create a text file with your post in it, you can update it using the file. In this case, I don't want it. The field, let's go ahead and update the post name. Oh gosh, I messed that up. It's 8. No. Let's change the post title. And then the value is, we'll call it edited post 6. And I think it's body. This is something I am typing from WP-CLI. That is it. No more. Leave me alone. I don't know why it's not quitting for me. I have no idea what's. We'll do it like this. AP post update post name equal edited post 6 dash body equal. Oh, forgot the post. Forgot the ID. Sorry. There we go. So now when we go over here, we'll click on our post 6. And that did not work. I think I passed the wrong ID.
Past 8.
Which one was 8? What was 8? I have no idea why that did not work.
Yeah, because that's the ID for post 6 that should work.
Oh, I know why. I passed it post title, which is the slug, and I should have passed it. I passed it post name, and I should have passed it post title. So we'll do WP post update 8 and post title
I see.
equal. This should work now. There we go.
It
It works now.
Nice.
Okay, great. Post update. So if I do WP post list, let's see. Post list. Let's find out what the body one is real quick. I don't remember what it is. Post date. D. I'm guessing what it wants is it wants a file for body. That did not work. I'm unsure why that does not work, but it normally does. But what WP Post Update would allow you to do is actually update the contents of that post also. So if we do a post list again, and let's see, WP Post delete, we'll delete 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's all we're left with. And we'll do WP Post create. And we'll do post name equal testing, post title equal post title.
Maybe this is a silly question. What's the difference between post name and post title? Title is the title. What's post name?
So post name is the actual slug.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so for instance, like if we go back, so if we look in the interface, the actual title itself is what the page would be called, what the actual post title would be. The post name is what the slug is. So in the URL, what the URL shows up as. See that? What the URL shows up as. So in this case, it would be /2015 11/17 testing. That's what that post would show up as. So let's go do a post status again. Whoops, post list. And then we'll go back a little bit. 15. One of the more common things that you want to do, especially if you're moving sites, depending on how you want to move sites, is or let's say you're moving a site from WordPress.com to .org. There's a very common tool used called the Wordpress Importer. And what Wordpress Importer does is it takes an XML file and will import post data from a WordPress.com site or from a WordPress.org site and actually populate your site with it. And so what we do is, this is actually makes two very important points. One, what that means is that you could write a plugin yourself that extends and offers WP-CLI functionality. And that's really important because if you're a plugin like WordFence or Jetpack or Kismet, being able to extend your plugin to be managed via WP-CLI is actually a really cool thing. It allows your users to interact with your plugin through the command line interface. So in this case, with WordPress Importer, what we're going to do is we are going to use it is a WP import command, and what we can do is we can pass a file. I have a file sitting in a directory here. It's called data.xml. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a WP import data.xml. What it wants is that inside the data.xml, it has post authors that don't exist on my site right now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it that whenever there's an author whenever there's a post being imported that has an author that doesn't exist on my site, I want it to create that author. And so right now what I'm going to do is I'll do that, starts the import process, and you'll see that it's uploading all sorts of things. It's uploading attachments, it's uploading pages. You'll see that it's uploading, it will upload media also. So if you need pictures that you're moving from a .com site or from a different site to WordPress, we can do that in here as well. And so we're going to watch it, we're going to see it, watch it import all of these items real quick, and then as soon as it's done, actually right now we can go through it and click on posts, and we can see that pages.
There you go.
We can see that it's gone ahead and imported a whole bunch of data here. And actually, if we just even go visit the front of the site, we'll see now that there's things that were not there before, and it's coming from our import. I was going to tell you, it's going to give you a breakdown of exactly everything that it imported, let you know that it finished. And now if we do a post list, we'll see that we have all sorts of data. And also, if we do a user list, we probably have new users. We do. Because these are the authors of the posts that we imported. And now all of that data is there. Everything is there now. That's actually kind of an interesting thing, because what that means, if you think about it, is that you can automate the transfer of the site almost completely using WP-CLI. All you need is the data file and a place and WP-CLI.
Just like I'm sorry to cut you out. Just like the migration.
Yeah, just like the migration. Yeah. It's fortunate it would work.
Right.
It's like almost like a not necessarily simpler, but like it would be almost the same thing.
Yeah.
In fact, you could however you are used to migrating a site, you could do that with WP-CLI as well because of the WP-DB command.
Yep.
WP-DB is actually really nice because what it allows you to do is run WP-DB export, right? So you'll see that it exported my file to WP-CLI talk. Let's see, right? So my file is there, my SQL file. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to empty this site. WP, let's see, it's WP site empty, I believe. Yep. WP site empty. It asks me if I want to empty the site. I'm going to say yes. So if I check this out, my site's going to be back to default. There's nothing there. But because I backed up since I have my SQL file, I can do WP-DB import WP-CLI talk.sql. It imports the database back,
boom,
and everything's back. So if you think about that, let's say that you wrote your own. Let's say you wrote your own program. You could automate. You could automate a script that takes a database dump and copies files to another directory, and then imports and moves the files into place all on its own, just using just WP-CLI and basic commands, right? And that's really super powerful because now we're thinking about automation. Now we're thinking about how you can build tools to make your site management much quicker. And it's actually a very, very nice thing. It's actually really cool. WP-DB actually even has options for repairing database. You can run queries directly to the database. You can drop tables. You can even create if you have privileges to create. But the ones that we use, the ones that I use the absolute most are WP-DB export and WP-DB import, because the only thing you need to move a WordPress site is the WP content folder and a database dump. And if those are the only two things you have, you can move a site anywhere on the internet that you're allowed to install WordPress.
One question: what about if you get some type of malicious code? How would you go clean it using this command line?
So there's actually a couple of different ways. One of the first ways is, let's talk about identifying that first, right?
Yes.
One of the most common things that happens when you get malware on your site is that your core files are compromised and they're modified. WP-CLI has a command in here called WP-Core verify checksums. And what that's going to do is it's going to verify the checksums of the files that are on your install against the actual checksums of the website. If you're unfamiliar with what checksums are basically, they are a hash that gets run and generated based on the contents of the makeup of a file. So if a file changes even by one tiny little bit, the checksum is different. So you'll see that I did WP Core verify checksums. It says that the WordPress install verifies against checksums. But let's say that I'm malware, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something so that every time somebody tries to send an email on this site, something bad happens, right? And so I'm going to do bad things here. All right. So now when I do a WP Core verify checksums, even though my WordPress website loads just fine, WordPress core has been modified. There's malware in my site now. And if I do WP Core verify checksums, it's going to tell me, hey, there's an issue here. This file doesn't verify against what the checksums are. So now I can actually have a method to go in and see, like, let me look at these files. Let me see what's going on with them. Let's see if there's an issue with them. And then what I can do is I can do a WP Core update -- version, or you can just -- force. Oops. WP Core update 4.3.1 -- force. And now I know that I can go ahead and reinstall WordPress using this pretty simple command. I just tell it what version that I need it to be on. And now when I go back to verify my checksums, they should pass. WP Core Update is actually a nice thing, because let's say I wanted to go to version 4.2.8, which I would highly advise against. If you update WordPress and something breaks, you should fix what's broken. Quick word of advice: your plugins and your themes should be compatible with WordPress, not WordPress compatible with your plugins and themes. So while there is no case where I would recommend doing this, if you needed to, you could send it back a version. So actually what I'll do here is we'll do WP Core version, just so we see that we're on 4.3.1, and we'll do an update version equal 4.2.8, and we'll force it, because we know that WordPress is installed. This is a problem with my command line. We'll pretend like it worked for now. Maybe I got a bad download from WordPress. Let's see.
Checksum.
I did. Let's say I got a bad package from WordPress. That's cool. So now if I do WP Core version 4.3, and then of course WP Core update. See, I don't know if dry run works here. It does not. WP. Let me see. Version. I know that there's a flag to let you know if there's an update or not. This might be extra. Guess not. So we'll do. Oh, it might be upgrade. Try run. Oh, no. We'll just do an update. See what happens. download the latest version, install it, and then we do version again. We're in 4.3.1. So that's very nice. So as far as malware goes and WordPress core goes, verified checksums is a really nice way to do that. With tools like WordFence or other plugins that extend their functionality to the command line, you can actually even run malware scans using WordFence's WP-CLI integration, and that's a really nice thing because that'll help give you some more insight into what might be infected on your site. I don't believe that theme has a verified checksums, but it might. Let me see. WP theme 2015 verified checksums. Yeah, it doesn't. Oops. Install. Mod, path, search, status. Yeah. Which reminds me. WP help core. Let's see what's in here. Check update. That's what it is. Let's go back real quick. WP core update. Dash version 4.2.8. Let's force it. Oh, forgot about that. Gonna have to notify them. That's a bad download file.
How's it work? Can you get it working?
Yeah. So it's 4.3. So now if we do WP core, check update, was it? Dang it, I forgot already.
Just check dash update.
Check dash update. There we go. So it'll show us that there is a version upgrade, 4.3.1. So we'll go ahead and do a WP core update again. WP core, check dash update one more time, and we're up to date. Not latest version. That's good. So as you can see, that can be really useful because again, if you're thinking about it in terms of being a person who manages a whole bunch of sites or a developer who manages a whole bunch of sites, you can write code to automatically check for updates, via command line, and not only that, but run them too. You could even probably write your own bash scripts that would automate a restore process for a site using WP-CLI very, very efficiently. And that's a great thing. That's something that if you can think about the possibilities of doing something like that, would be really, really cool. So let's do one thing here real quick. It's probably going to be the last thing we do because I think we're running out of time. We have a little bit of time. Let's talk a little bit about WP option. As a developer, one of the things that happens is that oftentimes you're working on a site at a URL that is just a test URL. Maybe it's local only to your computer and is not accessible to the web, or maybe you're working on like staging dot subdomain, and it eventually needs to go live. Well, there's a lot of ways to manage like production and staging environments and URLs like that. At its base level, one of the options that has to change whenever you're changing the URL of your site are the site URL and home URL options. And so, for instance, if we do WP option get site URL and WP option get home URL, no, it's just home. We have certain values in there, but let's just say that I wanted let's say that I changed my mind and I wanted this site to load at www instead, or let's say that I wanted to make this site work at a staging URL and call it staging.wp-CLI talk.dev. Well, there's two things that I have to do. The first thing is that I need to figure out where my
NAMP
map is. Alright, so I want this site to load at staging dot. Okay. I'm using map here as my server of choice, but you can use whatever you'd like. I need to restart Apache in this case, so that's why we're doing this. But if we go back and actually look at the site, visit the site real quick, it's going to be broken. Not going to work. Well, one, because, first off, because I changed the URL. Even if I use the new URL, not going to work. We're going to spin forever. No. So what we need to do is, we need to actually go up here and let's set these options. And we're going to use WP option set. WP option update, sorry. Site URL. We're going to set it to staging WP-CLI talk.dev. And we're going to update home to be the same. And now when we WP option get those, they'll be the new values. This is actually really important because we can see now, I don't know if you've ever had to actually update the URL of a WordPress website, you know that sometimes you have to go into the database and update database values and junk like that. Again, this is another way that you can automate modifying URLs and things of the sort. That actually also brings up another good point. That brings up another good point, and that is URLs. We'll just do a dry run right now. What we can see is that we've got a whole bunch of posts that are still referencing, because of the nature of how we've done this, there's only this match in just the GUID table. But we can see that we've changed our URL to be WP-CLI talk.dev to staging dot. But let's say that we had a whole bunch of posts that referenced that, or images that were in place that reference that old URL. They're not going to work at the new URL. One of the most common things that happens is that when you change URLs or you move from between different environments, you actually have to update URLs for images or for links. If you're changing your site's URL, you have to update links so that they go to the right place. And WP-CLI makes it really easy using the search replace command. Because what it allows you to do is it allows you to find places where it has one value and change them. Oops. Use a different value. And so we'll do a dry run here. Well, it's basically what we just did right now. And we'll see that we have 106 matches for this URL. But what we're going to do is we're going to remove the dry run. And it made 114. Oh, look, we also had some in post content. Right? I missed those. See that? We had 7 in post content. So that's important because what that means is that we were able to go through our entire site looking for an old URL that we had and update it very easily to the new URL. The important thing is that if you know a little bit about running a search and replace like this, you know that you have to account for what's called serialized data. Serialized data is data that is encoded, it's serialized in the WordPress database itself. That would not be caught if you just did a normal search and replace in the database because it's serialized data. WP-CLI is smart enough to recognize this information and identify it and then still update it. And if we actually go in here real quick and we'll do another dry run, we'll see that we shouldn't have any matches now for the old URL. And everything is up to date with the staging URL. This works for a lot of stuff. Let's say that we've got a lot of posts in here that have this markup just says markup. So what I want to do is I want to go and look in my database for anything where it says markup, and I want to replace it with, I don't know, let's just capitalize it, I guess. Mark up this stuff. We'll dry run it. And it did not find anything for some strange reason. I wonder if it doesn't like the. Yeah, that's what it was. Okay, so now we see we've got 5 post names, titles. I suppose I could probably also escape this, maybe. Might identify it like that. No, it didn't. We'll use this example for now. Right now we ran it dry run. Let's go ahead and run the search replace now. And now when we reload here, we should have. You'll see that we were able to make these search and replacements very, very easy to do. So we actually, it searched through our entire site and did an update. You can do this with anything. You can do this with anything. If you wanted to replace a simple word, I don't know. And we'll choose the word this, because it's probably pretty common, right? We'll dry run it just to see. We've got a lot of matches here. We'll remove the dry run. 846 replacements. Ooh, haha. See if we can find it somewhere else. There we go. So, searching and replacing is kind of an interesting thing because when you're building websites, you could use it for a whole variety of things. And then, just to kind of go back, let's say that I decided that, let's say I was had too much Dos Equis at this event tonight. I made all these mistakes while in not a clear state of mind. I'll just go back and database import the database dump I made earlier. Just do it like this, and then all my changes will go back to, well, my site will go back to the way that it was earlier. This is actually an important point. Since I made that database export a while earlier, it was still using my old options with WP-CLI talk.dev. I'll just go for the sake of it. And change this back. Since I imported an old database, and now my site will load back at the old URL, I hope. No, not there. Not there. I hope.
It's connecting.
I'm gonna prove me wrong here. That's correct. It just doesn't want to load for me for some strange reason. Oh, there it is. Just took a second. And now, like, all of those changes that I made with this and markup are all back to normal. So, kind of an interesting concept there, but also gives you a little bit of an idea about what you can do with that. We are running out of time here, and I do want to answer some questions if we can. So let's just look at the other subcommands, and we'll touch on them briefly. Cache, WP Cache gives you some really good options for clearing cache and even setting cache objects if that's what you'd like to do. That's really, really cool for a whole bunch of reasons, especially if you've ever worked with a caching plugin before. Being able to as a developer, being able to make changes to your CSS and then clear cache with a simple command instead of having to go into your interface and clear. Really, really cool. Managing user capabilities. If you've ever used, if you have any sort of capability management for users, that's obviously super useful. Comment management is really cool. We actually wrote a script that will parse through comments and have Akismet reevaluate them as spam. We wrote that bash script in conjunction with a company called Meetup to actually help identify spam comments and actually have Akismet go through and reevaluate them. You can manage cron stuff, especially as a developer. Managing cron events is going to be really cool for you.
What about media?
Media is the same thing too. Yeah, you can add and delete media. Add attachments from local files that are on your computer using WP-CLI. Delete media files from WP-CLI as well. WP-CLI is multi-site capable, so you can manage subsites of a multi-site using WP-CLI. It's actually really cool. You can manage your permalink rewrite rules here. If you're a developer using WP Scaffold is really cool. It will generate code for custom post types, taxonomies, things like that. We talked about WP plugin, post, and theme. You'll see in here that Jetpack is available here. But that's just kind of a little bit more proof that you can build your own WP CLI functionality into a plugin. So if you're writing a plugin and you want users to be able to manage it using or leverage its power using WP CLI, you can build that, and Jetpack does actually a pretty fantastic job of doing that. Manage sidebars, manage all of your terms, transients, manage widgets.
Yeah, everything.
You can do everything. You can anything that you want to do in the interface of WordPress, you can do through WP CLI, and that's proof. We didn't touch or we didn't modify any options at all through the web interface. It was all done through CLI, and you could continue to do that. You could do that you could do that with anything that you would like. You could even install your own themes or install a different theme from the repository. Add posts, add pages, and modify the contents of a post. Modify the statuses of posts, publish dates, anything that you could want to do, you can do from WP CLI. So super powerful. There's a whole lot more that WP CLI can do that we haven't even touched on. There's a whole talk that I've had with individuals and groups about leveraging WP CLI in a far more in-depth level as it pertains to automation. We touched on it a little bit earlier, talking about automating site backups and site restores. I've talked about that with people. That is an entire talk of its own. WP CLI is super powerful, and what we did today is just scratching the surface, by far just scratching the surface. And so that's kind of like I know it's a little bit more of a technical talk, but this is a pretty decent beginner and introductory class into WP CLI and how you can use it to manage a whole bunch of sites all at one time. Are there any questions?
We'll do another one, part 2, and
Yeah.
part 3, and part 4.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of different ways that you can interact with WP CLI. Denali made a good point earlier about identifying just inactive themes and then removing them.
Mhm.
Yeah, with a little bit of command line foo, you could make that happen very simply. You could do the same thing with plugins, identifying just inactive plugins and deleting them. We talked about format or list format exporting with JSON and CSVs. That the possibilities are endless for creating some pretty cool things there. Yeah, WP CLI, pretty great.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you guys for sitting through my long
Thank you,
winded.
Ralph.
If you do have questions about anything at all, even if it's just a general WordPress question, you can email me at robertv@me.com. That's my email address. If you have questions about WP CLI or just WordPress in general, need some advice, or I don't currently do development work or site building work for people, but if you need some recommendations for developers or people to work with, then I can help make recommendations as well. So Any questions at all about what we talked about today or just in the future, please let me know. Don't hesitate. I'll get it. Thank you guys for coming.
All right, folks, we have folks stayed like all the way at Periscope. Thank you guys for waiting. I know it's this is for advanced technical folks. Thank you so much for waiting, and thanks for the replays, and thanks for those folks watching from the web. We'll see you back in about an hour or so. Take care.